It was a stranger's voice, thick with cruel anticipation. "We know you are down here. Luca is done. Come out, and maybe we can make it quick." Sarah stopped breathing. The man reached the bottom of the stairs. The beam of a flashlight cut through the gloom, sweeping over the boxes of old decorations, the rusted tools, the dust motes dancing in the stagnant air. The beam moved closer to her hiding spot. She remembered what Luca had told her. 2 hands. Lean into it. Don't hesitate. The flashlight swung onto her. Sarah was blinded by the glare, but she saw the outline of a large man raising a weapon. She didn't think. Instinct, primal and terrifying, took over. She raised the gun. She squeezed her eyes shut. She pulled the trigger. The explosion was deafening in the confined space. The recoil jarred her arms all the way to her shoulders. A sound of shock, a sharp, punched-out exhale, followed by a heavy thud. Sarah opened her eyes. The flashlight lay rolling on the floor, casting erratic shadows against the wall. The man was crumpled on the concrete, 6 feet away, clutching his stomach. Dark blood was already pooling beneath his fingers. He looked at her with wide, disbelief-filled eyes, his mouth opening and closing without sound. Sarah dropped the gun, her hands shaking so violently she could barely feel them. She scrambled backward, a sob tearing from her throat. She had done it. She had taken a life. The horror of it washed over her, cold and nauseating. But beneath the bile was a fierce, burning realization. She was alive. She did not stay to watch him die. She grabbed the gun from the floor. Luca had told her to keep shooting, but she couldn't. She couldn't do it again. She ran for the stairs. She flew up them, bursting into the hallway. The house was a ruin. The overturned table was splintered. The walls riddled with holes that let in the biting wind. Furniture was overturned. Lamps shattered. It looked like a hurricane had birthed a war zone inside her living room. "Luca," she screamed, the name tearing at her throat. There was no answer. She ran to the front door. It was hanging off its hinges. The cold air hit her like a physical blow. She stumbled out onto the porch, slipping on the casing shells that littered the wood. The front yard was a graveyard of snow and metal. 2 black SUVs sat idling, their windshield shattered. Bodies lay in the snow, dark shapes against the white, motionless. Sarah scanned the scene frantically. Then she saw him. Luca was crouched by the front bumper of the nearest SUV, one hand bracing himself against the metal, the other still gripping his gun. There was a body at his feet, the last of them. "Luca," she ran to him, the snow crunching under her boots. He turned his head slowly at the sound of her name. His face was gray, drained of all color. His lips were almost blue. "Sarah," he whispered. The gun slipped from his fingers. It fell into the snow. He collapsed. Sarah dove forward, catching him before he hit the ground fully. He was dead weight, heavy and limp. She fell with him, her knees sinking into the drift. "No, no, no," she chanted, frantic. She grabbed his shoulders, turning him over. The entire left side of his sweater was soaked in blood. It was dark, sticky, warm, too warm against the freezing air. He had been hit badly. "I got them," he murmured, his eyes unfocused, staring up at the gray sky. "I got them all. You are okay. You are going to be okay," Sarah lied, her tears freezing on her face. "We need to get you inside. It is too cold." She grabbed him under the arms. He groaned, a sound of pure agony that cut through her heart. But she didn't stop. She hauled him backward, her boots slipping on the ice, straining with every ounce of strength she possessed. Adrenaline gave her power she didn't know she had. She dragged him foot by agonizing foot, up the stairs, across the ruined porch, into the hallway. She left a broad smear of crimson on the pristine white snow behind them. She got him as far as the rug in front of the dying fire. She collapsed beside him, her lungs burning. Luca's breathing was shallow, wet, rattling. "The phone," he rasped. "Call." Sarah scrambled for the handset. Miraculously, it had survived the chaos. She dialed the number he had made her memorize, her fingers slipping on the buttons. It rang once, twice. Status. A voice barked on the other end. "He is hurt," Sarah sobbed. "He is dying. You have to come now, please." "Who is this?" the voice asked. "Sarah. I am with Luca. He is bleeding out. The farmhouse on Route 9. Please. We are 5 miles out." "What?" the voice, Dante swore. "The roads are blocked with drifts. We are coming. Lady, keep pressure on it. Do not let him sleep." Sarah dropped the phone. She ripped the throw blanket from the sofa. She pressed it against Luca's side. He cried out, his back arching off the floor, his hand gripping her wrist with bruising force. I'm sorry, she wept, pressing harder. I am sorry. I have to. It is okay, he breathed, his grip weakening. His eyes fluttered shut. No, Sarah said. She slapped his cheek lightly. Look at me, Luca. Look at me. You do not get to sleep. You do not get to leave me here alone with this. He opened his eyes, struggling to focus on her face. A faint, crooked smile touched his lips. You shot him, he whispered. I heard it. You did good, Angel. I hated it, she said, choking on a sob. Good, he murmured. Hold on to that. Minutes turned into hours. Or maybe seconds. Sarah lost track of time. She only knew the rhythm of his breathing, the terrifying heat of his blood on her hands, the way the light was slowly fading from his eyes. She talked to him. She told him about her garden. She told him about the time she broke her arm in 3rd grade. She told him she loved the way he looked at her. She told him anything to keep him tethered to the world. Then she heard it. Sirens. They were distant at first, then growing louder. A wailing chorus cutting through the winter air. Sarah looked up, relief flooding her chest. They are here, Luca, she said. They are here. Luca listened, his brow furrowed. He forced his eyes open. Clarity returned for one sharp, painful moment. No, he wheezed. Not my men. Too loud. Sarah froze. Dante wouldn't use sirens. The sound of tires crunching on gravel, screeching brakes, doors slamming, then the amplified voice of authority booming from the driveway. This is the FBI. We have the perimeter surrounded. Come out with your hands up. Sarah looked at the door, then back at Luca. Her heart broke. They had survived the hit squad only to be caught by the wolf at the door. They will help you, she said, stroking his hair. They have paramedics. You will live. Luca grabbed her wrist again. His strength was almost gone. His fingers cold. He pulled her down until her ear was close to his lips. Sarah, he whispered urgently. Listen to me. I am here. Do not tell them I beg. He rasped, his voice fierce. Even in death's shadow. Just say I fought. Luca, promise me. I promise, she sobbed. I promise. His hand slid from her wrist. His eyes drifted shut. His breathing hitched, then slowed to a barely perceptible rhythm. He was unconscious. The front door was kicked in. Men in tactical gear swarmed the room, rifles raised. Hands. Show me your hands. One of them shouted. Sarah raised her blood-soaked hands slowly. She sat protectively in front of Luca's motionless body. He needs help, she screamed at the faceless soldiers. He is dying. Help him. Paramedics pushed past the agents. Sarah was pulled away roughly, but efficiently. She fought them for a second, trying to stay with him, but a female officer held her back. Let them work, ma'am, the officer said. Her voice was flat. You have to let them work. Sarah stood by the wall, shaking uncontrollably. She watched as they cut open his shirt. She saw the devastating wound in his side. She saw the frantic movements of the medics, the 4 lines, the gauze. Then she saw the glint of silver. They handcuffed his wrist to the stretcher rail before they even stabilized him. He's unconscious, Sarah shouted. He's not going anywhere. Procedure, ma'am, the officer said. Her voice was flat. They loaded him onto the gurney. They wheeled him out. Sarah followed as far as the porch. The storm had finally broken. The sun was trying to pierce the clouds, casting a weak, pale light over the carnage. The front yard was filled with police cruisers, an ambulance, black government SUVs. They loaded Luca into the back of the ambulance. The doors slammed shut, severing the connection between them. An officer draped a heavy foil blanket around Sarah's shoulders. She was standing in the snow in her jeans and a blood-stained sweater, shivering violently, but she felt none of it. She felt only the hollow, crushing silence that Luca had left behind. She watched the ambulance drive away, lights flashing, taking the only man who had ever truly seen her. The snow had melted, revealing the brown, dormant grass of early spring. The cottage had been repaired. New windows, a new door, the blood scrubbed from the floorboards, but it no longer felt like home. It felt like a museum of a memory Sarah could not shake. She'd been questioned for weeks. The local police, the FBI, prosecutors. She told them the truth mostly. She told them about the crash. She told them about the attack. She told them she shot the intruder in self-defense. But when they asked about Luca, about what had happened between them in those 48 hours, she gave them nothing. She became the stone wall he had taught her to be. Did he threaten you? They asked. Did he force you to help him? Did he beg for his life when he was bleeding out? Sarah had looked the federal agent in the eye, her chin high. He never begged, she said coldly. He fought. She had not heard a word since. He was in the system now, swallowed by a federal holding facility, facing charges that would put him away for a dozen lifetimes. She assumed she would never see him again until the package arrived. It came via a private courier, a plain brown envelope with no return address. Sarah signed for it with trembling hands. She took it into the kitchen, the same kitchen where he had kissed her, where they had argued, where she had hidden. She set it on the table. She used a knife to slit the seal. Inside there was a single sheet of heavy cream-colored paper. No letterhead, no signature. Just 3 words written in a bold, angular hand she recognized immediately. "You saved me." Sarah pressed a hand to her mouth. A sob caught in her throat. He was alive. He knew. She reached back into the envelope. There were 2 other items. The first was a silver key. It was old-fashioned, heavy, the kind that opened a door to something permanent. The second was a plane ticket, one way, first class. Departure tomorrow morning. Destination, Sicily, Italy. Sarah stared at the ticket. It was madness. It was abandoning her entire life, her home, her name, everything she knew, to chase a ghost who might not even be there. It was running toward danger instead of away from it. She looked around the empty kitchen. It was clean. It was safe. It was silent. She looked at the key in her hand. It felt warm against her skin. Sarah Miller, the grieving widow who hid from the world, was gone. She had died in the snow 3 months ago. The woman standing in the kitchen was someone else entirely. She was a woman who knew how to shoot. She was a woman who knew how to survive. And she was a woman who was done waiting for permission to live. She picked up the ticket. Outside, the first bud of a crocus pushed through the thawing earth, but Sarah did not see it. She was already packing. The journey took 17 hours. A long flight across the ocean, a shorter flight over sparkling turquoise water, and finally a drive along a winding coastal road that hugged cliffs so steep they made Sarah's stomach turn. The air here was different. It did not bite with the frost of the city she had left behind. Instead, it tasted of salt, lemon, sun-baked stone. The car dropped her off at the end of a long gravel driveway lined with cypress trees. The driver was a silent man who asked no questions. He simply nodded and drove away, leaving her standing in the silence. Sarah gripped the handle of her suitcase. In her pocket, the silver key felt heavy and warm against her hip. She looked up at the destination. It was a villa perched on the edge of the world, a sprawling structure of white stone and terracotta tiles, overlooking a sea so blue it looked like ink. It was beautiful. It was isolated. It was a fortress disguised as paradise. She walked up the driveway, the gravel crunching loudly under her boots. She had shed the heavy wool coat she had worn for months. Dressed now in a light linen dress that felt foreign on her skin, she felt exposed without the layers of winter, without the armor of her grief. The front door was massive, made of dark, weathered wood. Sarah hesitated. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. A chaotic mix of hope and terror. What if the key did not fit? What if the villa was empty? What if he was not the man she remembered, but the ghost she had created in the long, lonely nights since the arrest? She took a breath that tasted of jasmine and sea salt. She slid the key into the lock. It turned with a smooth, well-oiled click. Sarah pushed the door open and stepped inside. The interior was cool and damp, smelling of beeswax and old stone. The windows on the far side of the room were thrown wide open, framing the endless expanse of the ocean. White curtains billowed in the breeze, dancing like spirits. "I told them not to send a car until tomorrow." A voice came from the terrace. It was deep, rough, unmistakably him. Sarah dropped her suitcase. The sound echoed in the cavernous room. Luca stepped through the open glass doors. He stopped dead when he saw her. He looked different. The gray pallor of blood loss was gone, replaced by a healthy, untouched bronze. The desperate, hunted look in his eyes had softened, though the vigilance was still there, lurking beneath the surface. He wore a loose white shirt, unbuttoned at the top, and linen trousers. He looked healed. He looked free. And he looked like he was seeing a hallucination. Sarah could not move. She drank in the sight of him, the sharp angle of his jaw, the way his dark hair fell over his forehead. The scar she knew was hidden beneath his shirt. Luca walked slowly toward her, as if afraid she might vanish if he moved too fast. He stopped 2 feet away, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him, close enough to smell the soap and see air on his skin. "Sarah," he breathed, testing her name on his tongue. "You are alive," she whispered. "I am," he said. He looked at her with a vulnerability that broke her heart all over again. "I wasn't sure you'd come." The words snapped something inside her. The fear of the last 3 months, the interrogation rooms, the lonely nights staring at the ceiling, the terror of watching him bleed out in the snow. It all rushed to the surface in a blinding flash of white-hot anger. She stepped forward and slapped him. It was a hard, ringing blow that turned his head to the side. The sound cracked through the silence of the villa. Luca did not flinch. He did not look angry. He slowly turned his face back to hers. His eyes were burning with an intensity that matched her own. "You left me she choked out, tears spilling over her lashes. You made me promise to let you go. You let me think you were gone forever. I had to, he rasped. You didn't have to leave me alone. I had to make sure you were safe, he roared back. The calm facade shattered. I had to make sure they wouldn't come for you. I traded everything, Sarah. I gave them every name, every account, every route. I bought my life with the ruin of my empire. And I did it so I could stand here and look at you without seeing a target on your back. Sarah stared at him, her chest heaving. He had burned his world down for her. He had become a traitor to his own kind, a man without a country, just to give her this key. The anger evaporated, replaced by a desperate, overwhelming need. She surged forward, grabbing the front of his shirt. Luca met her halfway, his arms wrapped around her, crushing her against him, lifting her off her feet. He kissed her, and it was nothing like the kisses in the cottage. Those had been tasted in the shadow of death. This was a kiss of life. It was hard, possessive, deeply, agonizingly real. He tasted freedom and longing. Sarah buried her hands in his hair, anchoring herself to him, sobbing into his mouth as he devoured her. I missed you, he groaned against her lips, his voice breaking. God, I missed you. He carried her through the villa, not breaking the kiss, moving blindly toward the bedroom, where the sea breeze swept through the open windows. He lowered her onto the bed, his body covering hers, a heavy grounding weight she had craved for 90 days. There was no darkness to hide in this time. The afternoon sun spilled across the sheets, illuminating every inch of them. Luca stripped the linen dress from her body with trembling hands. His gaze was worshipful as he took her in. Sarah reached for his shirt, pushing it off his shoulders. Her fingers traced the jagged pink ridge of the scar on his side, the place where the bullet had entered, the place where she had pressed the towel to keep his life from leaking out. It healed, she whispered, touching the skin. You saved me, he said. He leaned down to kiss the pulse fluttering in her throat. You kept the blood in my veins long enough for the doctors to do the rest. They made love with the windows open to the sea, surrounded by the scent of salt and wild herbs. It was a desperate, joyful collision. There was no fear of intruders, no listening for sirens. There was only the slide of skin against skin, the sound of their breath mingling with the ocean, the feeling of being completely, irrevocably found. Sarah arched into him, wrapping her legs around his waist, demanding everything he had to give. Luca gave it willingly. He worshipped her body with a slow, deliberate passion, making up for every second of their separation. He looked into her eyes as he moved inside her, forcing her to acknowledge the reality of this moment, the permanence of it. I am here, he whispered with every thrust. I am here. I am yours. When the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the water in shades of violet and gold, they lay tangled together in the sheets, the cooling breeze drying the sweat on their skin. Sarah rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady, powerful beat of his heart. How did you do it? She asked softly. How are you here? Luca ran his hand down the curve of her spine. The feds didn't want me in a cell, he said. They wanted the organization. I gave them the Valentini family. I gave them the routes. In exchange, they gave me a new name, a new history, and this place. It is a ghost property officially. It does not exist. And you? Sarah asked. She propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. Do you exist? Only to you, he said. To the rest of the world, Luca the wolf is dead, buried in a federal prison grave. He reached up, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. His expression turned serious. But this life, it is quiet, Sarah. It is small. There is no power here. No empire. Just me and the sea. And the silence. Are you sure this is what you want? You could have gone back to the city. You could have found a normal man. Sarah looked at the scar on his chest. She thought of the empty cottage, the polite condolences of her neighbors, the hollow safety of a life without passion. I don't want a normal man, she said. And I don't want to be protected anymore, Luca. I spent my whole marriage being protected from the truth, and it almost killed me. She took his hand, intertwining their fingers. I want to stand beside you. Whatever this life is, whatever we build here, I want to be part of it. Not as a widow, not as a victim, as your partner. Lucas stared at her, his dark eyes searching her face. I am done with the underworld, Sarah, he said. I am done with the guns and the blood. But the instinct, it never truly goes away. I will always be dangerous. I know, she said. I am counting on it. He was silent for a long moment. Then he squeezed her hand. I'm ready to put it all down, he said. The violence, the past. But only if you ask me to. If you want me to be a soldier, I will be a soldier. If you want me to be a man who grows lemons and looks at the ocean, I will be that. Sarah did not speak. She simply leaned down and kissed him, slow and deep, a seal on a contract written in survival and blood. She pulled back, smiling against his lips. Come back to bed, she whispered. The lemons can wait. It was December 24th. The villa was warm, the fireplace crackling with olive wood, filling the large stone room with a sweet, earthy scent. But outside, the air had turned strangely, impossibly cold. Sarah stood by the antique dresser in the hallway. In her hand was the heavy black pistol, the one Luca had given her in the cottage, the one she had brought with her across the ocean. It was clean, oiled, unloaded. She opened the bottom drawer. Inside was a small velvet-lined box. She placed the gun inside. Are you sure? Luca's voice came from behind her. Sarah turned. He was standing in the doorway, holding a box of glass ornaments. He looked at peace. The tension that used to live in his shoulders finally gone. We don't need it on the mantelpiece, Sarah said softly, but we won't throw it away. Just in case. Just in case, Luca echoed. The words he had said to her a year ago. She agreed. She closed the drawer and locked it. Sliding the key into her pocket, she walked over to him, taking the box of ornaments. Together they moved to the center of the room, where a tall, fragrant pine tree stood. It was a tradition they had decided to reclaim. No longer a symbol of loneliness, but a marker of survival. They hung the glass spheres together, the silence between them comfortable and rich. Sarah, Luca said, pausing with a silver star in his hand. Look outside. Sarah turned to the terrace doors. She gasped. Against the backdrop of the dark, churning sea, white flakes were drifting down from the sky. They swirled in the wind, settling on the terracotta tiles, melting against the glass. It is snowing, she whispered. In the Mediterranean. A cold front, Luca said. He moved to stand behind her. He wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. They say it happens once every 50 years. Sarah leaned back against him, watching the impossible weather. It felt like a message, a closing of the circle. They had met in a blizzard that brought death. And now, on their first Christmas Eve of a new light, the snow had returned to bless them with peace. It is beautiful, she said. Yes, Luca murmured. He turned her in his arms, so he could look into her face. It is. He did not look at the snow. He looked only at her. Sarah reached up, cupping his face, feeling the warmth of his skin, the reality of his presence. They were thousands of miles from the cottage, living under false names, with a history written in blood and secrets. But standing there in the glow of the firelight and the falling snow, none of it mattered. They were no longer alone. Luca lowered his head. They shared a silent kiss. Soft and lingering, full of promises kept in a future reclaimed. Merry Christmas, Luca, she whispered against his lips. Merry Christmas, Angel. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the world in white, washing the past clean. The snow kept falling, all day, all night. It just kept coming down and down and down. Sarah sat alone in her small house, just her. She held a glass of red wine in her hand and stared at it. Outside, snow covered everything. Inside, everything was quiet, so quiet. She was 32 years old, and this was her first Christmas alone. 6 months. That's how long it had been since the police came knocking at her door at 3 a.m. Her husband was dead. A car accident, they said. But Sarah knew better. Cars don't just blow up on empty roads. That doesn't happen by accident. Her phone kept buzzing. Again and again. Her mom, her sister. They wanted her to come to dinner. They wanted her to smile and pretend everything was okay. She didn't want that. She wanted to be alone. So she turned off her phone and drank her wine. Then, SCRECH. A terrible sound outside. The sound of tires sliding on ice. Then crash. The whole house shook. Sarah jumped up. Her wine spilled everywhere. She stood there in the dark, her heart pounding. Something had hit the road near her house. Something big. She grabbed a flashlight, put on her boots and coat. Then she went outside. The snow bit her face. The wind was so cold it hurt. About 50 yards away, she saw it. A big black car. It had slid off the road right into a snowbank. The hood was smoking. Hello, she called out. Is anyone there? No answer. She walked through the deep snow toward the car. Her legs were cold. Her heart was beating fast. When she got close, she saw the driver's door was open. The car's inside light was flickering. A man was in the driver's seat. He was big, really big. His shoulders filled the whole seat. He wore an expensive black suit, but it was ruined. There was blood spreading across his white shirt. Sarah shined the flashlight at his face. He was awake. His eyes were open. They were dark, sharp, watching her. "Are you hurt?" she asked. The man groaned. He moved his hand to his side. Blood was coming through his fingers. "I can call an ambulance," Sarah said. "No ambulance," the man said. His voice was deep, rough, like gravel. "But you're bleeding," Sarah said. "I said no," he snapped. Then he looked at her, really looked at her. His eyes narrowed. "I just need to get off this road. Help me out." Sarah's gut told her to run. Normal people don't refuse help. Normal people don't look at you like that, like they're figuring out if you're a threat. But she couldn't leave him here. Not in this cold. He would freeze. "My house is just over there," she said, pointing. He didn't answer. He just gritted his teeth and pulled himself out of the car. He stumbled. Sarah moved fast and caught his arm. He was heavy, like a wall of muscle and heat. He leaned on her, and she smelled leather and expensive cologne and blood. "Easy," she said. She put her arm around his waist. They walked back to her house. It was slow. It was hard. By the time they got inside, Sarah was breathing hard. She helped him to the sofa. He fell onto it with a heavy sigh. In the better light, Sarah could see his face clearly. He was beautiful, in a hard way, like something dangerous. His jaw was strong. His nose looked like it had been broken before. His hair was jet black. "I need a first aid kit," he said. "And whiskey, if you have it." "I have wine," Sarah said, taking off her coat. "Whiskey," he said, like there was no room to argue. Sarah felt angry. He was bleeding on her sofa and telling her what to do, but she wanted to get the whiskey and the first aid kit anyway. When she came back, he had already taken off his jacket and his shirt. Sarah stopped. His whole body was covered in scars. Old scars. Like a map of violence and pain. The fresh wound was a deep cut along his ribs. It looked really bad. She set the supplies on the table. She handed him a glass of whiskey. He drank it all in one swallow. He didn't even wince. "Sit back," Sarah said. She knelt down next to him. He watched her while she worked. His eyes were heavy on her skin, like a weight. When she cleaned the wound with antiseptic, his stomach muscles got tight. But he didn't make a sound. "You've done this before," he said. Not a question. "My husband was clumsy," Sarah lied. Her husband was an accountant. He fainted at the sight of blood. Sarah had learned to do this at a shelter years ago, but she didn't want to tell this stranger her whole life story. "You're lucky," Sarah said. "This needs stitches, but if you keep it wrapped tight, it should close." She finished taping the bandage. She sat back on her heels. "I'm Sarah," she said. The man looked at her. His eyes traveled down her body, looking at her silk blouse. Looking at her. "Luca," he said. "Just Luca. For tonight." "For tonight?" Sarah asked. He sat up. He tested the bandage. He seemed to get better really fast. His movements got smoother, more dangerous. "You live here alone, Sarah?" His voice was casual, but his eyes were sharp. Sarah stiffened. "My husband is away on business." Luca smirked. It wasn't a nice smile. "No, he's not," Luca said. "There's no ring on your finger, and there's a shadow in your eyes." Sarah felt her face get hot. This stranger was reading her like a book. "You're very observant for a man who just crashed a car," she said. "It keeps me alive," Luca said. He leaned forward. The space between them got smaller. "Thank you for helping me. Most people would have left me there." "I thought about it," Sarah admitted. Luca laughed. It was a low sound that vibrated through the floor. "I bet you did," he said. "You have a careful look about you, like a deer that smells the wolf, but doesn't know which way to run." "I'm not a deer," Sarah said. She stood up. "And don't call me that." "Whatever you say," Luca said. His eyes were bright with something that looked like fun. "I need to change," Sarah said suddenly. "My jeans are soaked from the snow." She walked down the hallway to her bedroom. She left the door a little bit open. Just a habit from living alone. She started to take off her blouse. Then something made her freeze. A feeling like someone was watching. She looked across the hall. There was a mirror in the living room. From the crack in her door, she could see the reflection of the sofa. Luca was sitting there. He had his drink in his hand, but he wasn't looking at the fire. He was looking at the mirror, at her. She could see his eyes in the reflection, watching, not looking away. She was standing there, starting to undress. And he was watching. Sarah should have slammed the door. She should have marched out and told him to leave, but she didn't. Instead, something hot bloomed in her stomach. She turned her back to the door. She pulled her sweater over her head. She hid herself. When she came back to the living room 5 minutes later, Luca was staring at the fire. He didn't apologize. He didn't look guilty. He looked like a man who took what he wanted. "The storm is getting worse," he said, as if nothing happened. Right on cue, the wind outside got louder. It was battering the walls. The lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then everything went dark. Sarah gasped. "Stay put." Luca's voice came through the darkness. "Come. In charge." She heard the sound of a match. Then the fire roared to life. He had thrown more logs on it. The orange glow came back. It filled the room with long shadows. "Come sit," Luca ordered. Sarah sat on the sofa, as far away from him as she could get. The space between them felt electric, like there were secrets hanging in the air between them. Luca poured more whiskey. He offered the bottle to her. "It helps," he said. Sarah took the bottle and drank straight from it. The burn in her throat felt good. "So," Luca said, stretching his legs out, "tell me why a beautiful woman is hiding from the world on Christmas Eve." Sarah stared at the fire. The darkness made it easier to talk. "He died," she said simply. 6 months ago." Luca didn't say he was sorry. He didn't offer empty words. He just nodded. "How?" he asked. "Car accident." "An explosion," Sarah said. She turned the bottle in her hands. "They said it was mechanical failure. I think they were lying." Luca went very still. He looked at her. He seemed to be putting together a puzzle in his mind. "Why do you think that?" he asked. "Because he was terrified," Sarah whispered. "In the weeks before it happened, he was jumpy, paranoid. He wouldn't tell me why. And then boom." Luca took a sip of his drink. He never took his eyes off her face. "Grief makes us see monsters in the shadows, Sarah," he said. "Sometimes bad things just happen. And sometimes bad people make them happen," Sarah said back. He smiled then, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Yes," he said. "That's true too." He leaned back. The firelight made sharp angles on his face. He looked dangerous, sitting there in her living room with his bloody shirt. And she knew he had a gun. She had felt it under his jacket when she helped him inside. He was a predator resting in her home. But Sarah didn't want to run. She wanted to know more. "Are you in trouble?" she asked. "I'm always in trouble," Luca said. "Is someone looking for you?" Sarah asked. "Probably," Luca said. He swirled his whiskey. "Does that scare you?" Sarah asked. "I don't know," Sarah admitted. She looked at his hands. Strong, capable, hands that could hurt or heal. "You're armed, aren't you?" she asked. "Yes," Luca said. "Are you going to kill me?" Sarah asked. The question hung in the air, stark, terrifying. Luca turned his head slowly to look at her. The fire light reflected in his eyes. They looked like pools of dark, melted obsidian. He let the silence stretch, testing her, watching her pulse flutter in her throat. Then he laughed softly. It was a dark sound, intimate. It made her shiver. "No, Angel," he said. His voice dropped low, husky. "I'm not going to kill you. Only if you beg me to." Sarah stared at him. The words were a threat and a promise all at once. She shivered. And she knew for certain it wasn't from the cold. Sarah woke up to the smell of wood smoke and gray morning light. The storm was still happening. She had fallen asleep on the sofa. A blanket was twisted around her legs. For a second, she expected silence. The usual crushing weight of another morning alone. Then she saw him. Luca was sitting in the armchair across from her, exactly where he had been the night before. He didn't look like he had slept. His body was stiff, alert. His eyes were fixed on the window where snow was piling up against the glass. On the small table next to him was a gun, black, matte. It looked out of place next to her ceramic coasters. Sarah sat up slowly. She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. The movement got his attention. He turned his head. The morning light caught the exhaustion on his face, but his eyes were still intense. "Good morning," he said. His voice was rough, lower than she remembered. "You didn't sleep," Sarah said. She pushed her hair back from her face. "I don't sleep in strange houses," Luca replied. He picked up the gun. He slid it into his waistband in one smooth movement, like it was just a wallet. "Especially not when I'm bleeding." Sarah stood up. The room was cold. The fire had burned down to embers. "I'll make coffee and breakfast," she said. "You need to eat to replace the blood you lost." She went to the kitchen. She needed the familiar feeling of making coffee to calm her shaking hands. But when Luca followed her a moment later, her kitchen didn't feel safe anymore. He leaned against the doorway. He filled the whole space. His presence made the room feel small and airless. He watched her move. He didn't help. He didn't look away. "You're trying very hard," Luca said. His voice cut through the sound of sizzling butter. Sarah flipped an egg. She refused to look at him. "I'm making breakfast," she said. "It's what people do. It's what people do when they want to pretend everything is normal," Luca said. He pushed off the doorway. He took a step closer. "You march around this house with your chin high," he continued, playing the role of the strong, independent widow. "But you are shaking, Sarah." Sarah set the spatula down with a sharp sound. She turned to face him. "I took a stranger into my home in the middle of a blizzard," she said. "I cleaned his wounds. I'm feeding him. I think I'm handling this quite well." "You're handling it like a woman who's waiting for the floor to drop out from under her," Luca said. He moved closer. He was in her personal space now. She had to tilt her head back to look him in the eye. "You've been waiting for the disaster to strike for a long time," he said. "Even before last night." "You don't know me," Sarah snapped. I know your type, Luca said. You hold it all in. You think if you just stay quiet and follow the rules, the pain will stop. He reached out. His hand hovered near her face, but he didn't touch her. You're drowning, Angel, he said, and you're too proud to scream. Stop analyzing me, she warned. Her heart was hammering. And stop talking about my grief like you understand it. You know nothing about my husband. I know he left you alone, Luca said. His voice was cruel in its honesty. I know he's dead, and you're here, freezing in a cottage pouring wine for a ghost. The anger flared white-hot in Sarah's chest. Without thinking, she lashed out. Her palm connected with his cheek. The sound cracked through the kitchen. Silence crashed down instantly. Sarah froze. Horror washed over her. She had just hit a man with a gun. A man who had admitted he was dangerous. She stared at the red mark blooming on his face. Luca did not recoil. He did not yell. Slowly, he turned his face back to hers. His eyes were dark, burning, but not with anger. He stepped in. He closed the final inch between them. Sarah backed up until her hips hit the counter. She was trapped. Luca leaned down. His face was so close to hers. She could feel the heat coming off his skin. He brought his mouth close to hers, hovering a breath away. She could taste the whiskey on him from the night before, mixed with danger. She trembled. Her hands gripped the edge of the counter. She expected violence. Instead, he brushed his lips against hers, so light, like a feather. It was more shocking than a bruise. It was a taunt, a question, a test. He stayed there for one heartbeat. Then he pulled back. He stepped away, putting 2 feet of distance between them. He ran a hand through his hair. He looked at the floor. He let out a long, ragged breath. I apologize, he said roughly. Sarah blinked, stunned. The air around them was still vibrating. What? She asked. I should not have pushed you, Luca said. His voice was controlled again. The predator was leashed. And I should not have done that. It was undisciplined. He looked at her then, and for the first time, the arrogance was gone. In its place was something human and weary, a flicker of regret. The eggs are burning, he said quietly. Sarah turned back to the stove. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely save the meal. They ate in silence. The only sound was the scraping of forks against ceramic. But everything had changed. The fear had receded. It was replaced by confused, simmering awareness. By early afternoon, it was cold inside the cottage. Really cold. The power lines were clearly down for miles. The fire wasn't enough to keep the house warm. Do you have a generator? Luca asked. He was standing by the window, watching the whiteout conditions. In the shed out back, Sarah said, but it hasn't been run in 2 years. I don't know if it works. Show me, Luca said. They bundled up in coats and scarves. They braved the wind. The shed was freezing. It smelled like gasoline and old oil. The generator sat in the corner, a big metal beast covered in dust. For the next hour, they worked side by side. Sarah held the flashlight while Luca worked on the engine. She watched his hands. Large, scarred, but surprisingly skilled. He knew exactly what he was doing. He stripped the carburetor with efficient movements. He explained what he was doing to her in short, clipped sentences. Hold this, he would say, handing her a bolt. Or, light here. There was no meanness in his tone. He treated her as a capable partner. When a rusted nut refused to budge, he didn't curse or force it with blind rage. He applied steady, calculated pressure. His jaw was set in concentration. She saw the sharp intelligence behind his brute strength. He was a man who understood how things work, how to fix what was broken, how to dismantle what was in his way. At one point, he winced. His hand went to the wound at his side. You're hurting, Sarah said. She stepped closer. It's fine, he grunted. Luca, let me do the choke, she insisted. She reached past him. He paused. He looked at her. Then he stepped back. He allowed her to take over the final step. When the engine finally roared to life, sputtering smoke before settling into a loud, rhythmic chug, a rare, genuine smile broke across his face. It transformed him. The hardness melted away for a second. He revealed the man he might have been in a different light. Good work, Sarah, he said. The praise warmed her more than the heater ever could. They returned to the house. Snow crunched under their boots. The lights flickered on. Yellow glow filled the living room. The hum of the furnace kicking in was the most beautiful sound Sarah had heard in months. But as the afternoon wore on, the snow did not stop. It fell thicker, heavier, burying the world. Luca stood by the window again. His phone was in his hand. He had been trying to make a call for an hour, but the signal was dead. You should try to sleep, Sarah said. She came up behind him. The roads won't be clear until tomorrow at the earliest. Luca turned. His face was grim. The lightness from the shed was completely gone. I cannot leave tomorrow, he said. What do you mean? Sarah asked. I mean the roads are not the only problem, Luca said. He looked at the phone. Then he shoved it into his pocket. Someone is looking for me. A rival crew. They know I'm in this area. Sarah felt a cold knot of dread tighten in her stomach. So you're staying? She asked. Hiding here? I have to, Luca said. What about me? Sarah demanded. Her voice was rising. You are dragging me into this. If they find you here, they will not find me, he interrupted. I covered my tracks. You crashed a car into a snowbank, Sarah shouted. How is that covering your tracks? You are dangerous, Luca. I knew it the moment I saw you. You have brought your war to my doorstep. You are already in the war, sweetheart, Luca said softly. The nickname was not a taunt this time. It was heavy with pity. Sarah stopped. What? She whispered. Luca sighed, a sound that seemed to come from the bottom of his soul. He walked over to the fireplace. He leaned against the mantel. He looked down at the flames. Your husband, he said slowly. Mark. What about him? Sarah whispered. He was not an accountant, Luca said. He was not looking at her. Well, he was, but not for a firm. What are you talking about? Sarah asked. He worked for the criminal side of the city, Luca said. He moved money. Money from bad people. I cleaned it. Sarah shook her head, a numb denial spreading through her limbs. No, she said. That's ridiculous. Mark was boring. He was safe. He was stealing from them, Luca said. He continued relentlessly. He was skimming off the top. He thought he was smarter than them. He thought they would notice a few percent here and there, but they always notice. He turned to face her. The explosion on the highway, he said. It wasn't an accident, and it wasn't random. It was a message, and it was a punishment. The world tilted on its axis. Sarah reached out. She gripped the back of the sofa to keep from falling. The pieces slammed together in her mind. The late nights, the sudden influx of cash he claimed was a bonus. The terrifying paranoia in his final weeks, the way he checked the locks 3 times a night. He knew, she choked out. He knew he was going to die. He knew he was caught. He was trying to buy his way out, Luca said. But you don't buy your way out of that life. Sarah made a sound that was half sob, half gasp. Her legs gave out. She didn't hit the floor. Luca was there in an instant, moving with that terrifying speed. He caught her, his arms wrapped around her. Holding her up, he pulled her against his chest. His grip was hard and unyielding. I'm sorry, he murmured into her hair. I'm sorry you had to know. Sarah buried her face in his shirt. She sobbed. She cried for the husband she had lost. She cried for the stranger she had married, the man who had lied to her every single day. She cried for the danger she was in, the terrifying realization that her entire life for the last 3 years had been built on a foundation of criminal secrets. Luca held her through it all. He did not shush her. He did not offer false comforts. He simply stood there, a solid wall of heat and strength, absorbing her grief. His hand came up to cradle the back of her head. His fingers tangled in her hair, pressing her closer to him. It was protective, yes, but there was tension in it, too. A possession. He was holding her as if he was the only thing standing between her and the abyss. Hours later, the house was quiet again. Sarah could not sleep. Her bedroom felt too large, too full of ghosts that Luca had summoned. Every shadow looked like an accusation. Every creak of the house sounded like an intruder. She got up. She wrapped her silk robe tightly around her waist. She walked barefoot into the living room. The fire was low, casting a deep red glow over the room. Luca was sitting on the rug before the hearth, cleaning his gun. He had taken it apart. The metal components were laid out on a cloth. He reassembled it by feel, his eyes fixed on the flames. He heard her approach, but he did not turn. Sarah sat down on the sofa behind him. She watched his back, the broad expanse of his shoulders, the way the muscles shifted as he worked. She felt hollowed out, scraped clean by the truth. He never told me, she said softly into the darkness. Luca slid the magazine back into the weapon with a sharp click. Men like that, Luca said, they think they are protecting you by lying. They think if you do not know the sin, you will not be stained by it. Was he a bad man? Sarah asked. Luca turned then. He shifted his body so he could look up at her. He was a weak man who got greedy, Luca said. Does that make him bad? That is for you to decide. Sarah looked at him. This killer, this criminal who had told her the truth when the man she loved had only given her lies. I feel like I'm mourning a stranger, she whispered. Then stop mourning, Luca said. The command hung in the air between them. It's not that simple, she whispered. He was my husband. I belong to him. Luca stood up. He moved slowly, approaching the sofa until he was standing over her. The firelight caught the sharp angle of his jaw, the darkness of his eyes. He looked down at her. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with sudden, suffocating intensity. He reached out. His knuckles grazed the line of her jaw. His touch was rough and calloused against her soft skin. He is gone, Luca whispered. His voice was a low rumble that seemed to vibrate in her chest. Grace, Luca whispered. Sarah paused.
Wait.
The document called her Sarah, then suddenly switched to Grace. I'll keep it consistent as Sarah. He left you behind in a mess of his own making. You do not owe him your tears anymore, he continued. His thumb brushed her lower lip, pulling it down slightly. Sarah stopped breathing. And you do not owe the dead your body anymore, he said. Sarah stared up at him. Her heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The grief was still there, a bruised ache in her chest. But beneath it, something else was waking up. Something hot and reckless and alive. She looked at the man who had brought danger into her home, and for the first time in 6 months, she did not feel alone. She felt seen, and she felt terrified of how much she wanted him to keep touching her. The truth about Mark hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire, acrid and choking. Sarah moved through the cottage like a ghost. She touched familiar objects, a vase, a framed photograph, the spine of a book. She was testing to see if they were still real. Her entire life felt like a stage set constructed by a man she had never truly known, a backdrop for crimes she could not comprehend. Luca watched her from the armchair. He had not moved much since the morning, conserving his strength, but his eyes followed her every step. He was a predator resting, lethal and silent, yet his presence was the only solid thing in her world right now. Sarah stopped by the window. The snow was still falling, a relentless white wall burying them alive. She turned to look at him, her curiosity cutting through the numbness. How many? She asked. Her voice was quiet but steady. Luca looked up from the magazine of his gun, which he had been idly loading and unloading. He did not pretend to misunderstand her. How many what? He asked. Sarah paused.
People, she said.
How many people have you killed? A normal man would have flinched. He would have stuttered, made excuses, lied to protect her delicate sensibilities. Luca did none of those things. He held her gaze. His face was impassive, though a shadow seemed to darken his irises. 22, he answered. The number was spoken without pride, but also without shame. It was a fact, cold and hard as the ice on the windows. Sarah felt a tremor run through her hands, but she balled them into fists at her sides. She should have been terrified. She was standing in her living room with a mass murderer. By all rights, she should be running into the storm to escape him. But the fear did not come. Instead, a strange, morbid fascination took root in her chest. Mark had killed people, too, indirectly, with his greed and his cowardice. At least Luca looked her in the eye when he admitted his sins. Does it bother you? She asked, remembering them. I remember the faces of the ones who deserved it, Luca said. His voice was low. And I remember the faces of the ones who did not. The rest are just work. And which one am I? Sarah asked. She stepped closer to him. Am I working or do I deserve it?
Luca stood up then.
The movement was sudden and fluid. He closed the distance between them in 2 long strides, towering over her. You are neither, he said roughly. You are a mistake. You are an innocent woman caught in the blast radius of a war you did not start. And I intend to keep you that way. He reached behind him, pulling the gun from his waistband. He held it out to her, handle first. The black metal seemed to suck the light from the room. Take it, he ordered. Sarah stared at the weapon. I hate guns, she said. I know, Luca said, but hate will not stop a bullet. If they come for me, Sarah, they come for you, too. You need to know how to use this just in case. Sarah let out a short, bitter laugh. It sounded jagged in the quiet room. My husband was an accountant who laundered money for the mob, she said. And now a hitman is handing me a pistol in my own kitchen. It's quite the Christmas story. Take it, he repeated. His tone brooked nothing of refusal. Sarah reached out. The gun was heavier than she expected, cold and dense in her palm. It felt alien, an object of death invading her sanctuary. 2 hands, Luca instructed. He moved behind her, his chest pressed against her back. The heat of his body was a shock against the chill of the house. He reached around. His large, calloused hands covered hers, guiding her grip.
Thumbs forward, he said.
Do not cross them behind the slide, or it will take the skin off your knuckles. Sarah tried to focus on his instructions, but her senses were overwhelmed by him. The scent of leather and wood smoke, the hard wall of muscle against her spine, the rough texture of his palms against her soft skin. He adjusted her stance. His hands lingered on her waist for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. Then he moved to her shoulders. Feet apart, he murmured. His breath stirred the hair near her ear. Lean into it. If you fire, it will kick. You have to be ready. Sarah raised the gun. She aimed at the far wall above the fireplace. Her arms trembled. Steady, Luca whispered. His voice was a vibration against her back. Breathe out.
Squeeze.
Do not pull. She fired the weapon. The click was loud in the silence. Good, Luca said. He did not step away. Sarah lowered the gun, but she did not move away either. She leaned back just an inch, allowing the contact between them to deepen. For a moment, they stood frozen, a tableau of violence and protection. I hope I never have to use it, she whispered. So do I, Angel, Luca replied.
His voice was thick.
So do I. Later that afternoon, something surreal happened. Luca found a stain of blood on his shirt, the one he had worn when he crashed. It had soaked through the bandages earlier. He was attempting to scrub it out in her laundry room sink. Sarah found him there, shirtless, the muscles of his back flexing as he worked the fabric under cold water. The sight of him stopped her in the doorway. His skin was a map of violence, scarred and marked. But he was beautiful in a brutal, classical way. He looked like a statue that had been broken and put back together with gold. Let me, she said. She stepped into the room. Luca paused. He looked over his shoulder. I can manage, he said. You will reopen your stitches, Sarah said. She moved to the sink. She gently nudged him aside. To her surprise, he yielded. She plunged her hands into the icy water. She took the fabric from him. They stood side by side in the cramped space, their arms brushing with every movement. The air grew heavy, charged with the unspoken things that had been building between them for 24 hours. Sarah scrubbed at the dark stain, watching the water turn pink. Why do you do it? She asked softly. This life. It was the only door open, Luca said. He was watching her profile, his gaze intense. I grew up with nothing, he continued. They offered me everything. Loyalty, respect, power. And now, Sarah asked. She turned to look at him. Is it worth it? Being hunted like an animal in the snow? It was, Luca said. Until yesterday? Sarah's breath hitched. She looked up at him, water dripping from her hands unnoticed. What changed yesterday? Luca did not answer with words. He reached out. His wet hand cupped her cheek. His thumb traced the line of her jaw. His touch was reverent, almost disbelieving. Sarah leaned into his palm. Her eyes fluttered shut. A small sound escaped her throat, a whimper of need that she could not suppress. She pressed her body against his. Her hands came up to rest on his bare chest. Her fingers splayed over the hard pectoral muscles, feeling the heavy rhythmic thud of his heart beneath the skin. It was beating fast, just like hers. Luca groaned low in his throat. His other hand came up to grip her waist, pulling her flush against him. The damp shirt fell into the sink with a splash. He lowered his head. His mouth hovered inches from hers. Sarah rose on her tiptoes, seeking him, desperate to close the gap. She wanted him to kiss her. She wanted him to consume her. But at the last second, Luca pulled back. He wrenched himself away from her, gripping the edge of the sink until his knuckles turned white. His breathing was ragged, harsh in the quiet room. Sarah, she whispered, confused and aching. He did not look at her. He stared at the wall, his jaw clenched tight enough to snap. If I kiss you now, he rasped. His voice sounded like it was being dragged over broken glass. I will not stop. I will take you right here, against this sink, and I will not be gentle about it. Sarah stared at his back, her blood singing in her veins. Maybe I do not want you to stop, she said. Luca turned then. His eyes were blazing with a mixture of desire and restraint. You are grieving, Sarah, he said. You are confused. And I am not a man who takes advantage of vulnerable women. Go. He pointed to the door. Go before I change my mind. Sarah fled, but she did not run from fear. She ran because she knew he was right, and she hated him for it. And more than that, she hated that she wanted him to change his mind. Night fell early, bringing a darkness so absolute it felt weighty. The generator chugged faithfully in the distance. but Sarah left the lamps off. She preferred the firelight. It felt primal. It felt appropriate for the decision she had made. She stood in her bedroom, looking at herself in the mirror. She had showered, washing away the scent of the old Sarah, the grieving widow. She applied a touch of perfume to her throat and wrists. Then she reached into the back of her drawer. She pulled out a garment she had never worn for Mark. It was a floor-length nightgown of champagne-colored silk, suspended by thin spaghetti straps. It skimmed her curves like liquid water, hiding nothing, promising everything. She pulled a heavy velvet robe over it, tying the belt loosely. She was done with the past. She was done with the ghost of a husband who had sold his soul for money. She was alive. She was here. And there was a man in her living room who looked at her as if she were the only source of warmth in a frozen world. Sarah walked into the living room. Luca was sitting on the rug before the fire, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He looked up as she entered. The glass paused halfway to his mouth. He went very still. Sarah walked over to the hearth. She did not sit in the chair. She sat on the rug, close enough to him that the heat of his body radiated toward her. She reached for the bottle of whiskey. She poured a splash into her own glass. She took a sip, the amber liquid burning a path down her throat. She set the glass down. She turned to face him. "I am not confused," Sarah said. Lucas set his glass down with deliberate care. He turned his body fully toward her. The firelight danced over his features, highlighting the sharp cheekbones, the intense, hungry darkness of his eyes. "Sarah," he warned. His voice was a low rumble. "I do not want to talk about the weather," she said, cutting him off. "And I do not want to talk about the men who are hunting you. I want to talk about us." "There is no us," Luca said, though the words lacked conviction. "I leave in the morning," he continued. "If we survive, then we have tonight." Sarah whispered. She reached out, her hand trembling slightly as she placed it on his knee. He muscle beneath the fabric jumped at her touch. "I have spent 6 months feeling like I died in that explosion, too," she said. "I am cold, Luca. Everywhere. I want to feel something again." She looked him dead in the eye, letting all her grief and her need and her anger bleed into her gaze. "Make me forget the funeral," she said. "Make me forget him." Lucas stared at her for a long, agonizing moment. He seemed to be warring with himself, his honor battling his instinct. He looked at her hand on his knee, then up to her face, searching for any sign of hesitation. He found none. "Say it," he demanded. His voice was husky, stripped of all pretense. "If this is what you want, Sarah, you have to say it clearly so there are no mistakes." Sarah took a breath. She untied the belt of her robe, letting the velvet fall open to reveal the shimmering silk beneath. "I want you, Luca," she said. "I want you to touch me." Something in Luca snapped. The restraint shattered. "Come here," he growled. He reached out and pulled her toward him. Sarah went willingly, moving into the circle of his arms. He did not kiss her immediately. Instead, his hands came up to frame her face, his thumbs tracing her cheekbones, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her dizzy. "You sure?" he asked one last time, his gaze searching her soul. "Yes," she breathed. He lowered his head and captured her mouth. It was not a tentative brush of lips this time. It was a claim. His mouth was hot and demanding, tasting of whiskey and fire. Sarah opened to him with a gasp. Her hands tangled in his dark hair, pulling him closer. The kiss deepened, becoming a desperate, hungry thing. He tasted like danger, but he felt like light. Luca's hands moved down her throat, over her shoulders, pushing the robe from her body until it pooled on the rug behind her. He broke the kiss to look at her. His gaze traveled down the length of her body in the silk gown. The appreciation in his eyes was raw and worshipful. "Beautiful," he murmured against her skin as he trailed kisses down the column of her neck. "You are so beautiful, Sarah." He began to unbutton the bodice of the gown. His movements were slow, agonizingly deliberate. He never broke eye contact, watching her reaction to every inch of skin he revealed. Sarah trembled, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The fire popped and crackled beside them, but the heat between them was far more intense. When the silk slid away, Luca did not rush. He treated her body as if it were a sacred thing, something to be revered. His large, rough hands mapped her curves with a tenderness that belied his violent nature. He touched her as if he were memorizing her, learning the language of her skin. Sarah arched into him, a sob catching in her throat, not of sadness, but of overwhelming relief. The numbness that had encased her for months shattered. She felt everything, the roughness of his fingertips, the weight of his body pressing her down onto the thick rug, the friction of skin against skin. "Sarah," she whispered his name like a prayer. "I have you," he swore. His voice was guttural against her ear. "I have you, Angel. Let go." And she did. They made love in the glow of the firelight, the storm raging impotently outside the walls. It was slow and intense. A desperate conversation of bodies. Every touch was a reassurance. Every movement a promise. Sarah cried out, the sound torn from her by a pleasure so sharp it bordered on pain. And Luca was there to catch the sound with his mouth. He anchored her, his strength becoming her shelter. It was not just physical.
It was an exorcism.
With every thrust, he drove away the ghosts of the past. With every kiss, he rewrote the history of her body. Sarah clung to him, her nails digging into his shoulders, feeling the scars on his back, accepting the darkness in him because it matched the darkness in her. For a long time, there was only the sound of their breathing, the crackle of the fire, the soft, stifled cries of release. Afterward, the silence returned, but it was no longer heavy. It was peaceful. Sarah lay curled against Luca's side, her head resting on his chest. He had pulled the velvet robe and the throw blanket over them, creating a warm cocoon. His arm was wrapped tightly around her, his hand idly stroking her hair. Sarah listened to his heartbeat as it slowed to a steady, powerful rhythm. She felt exhausted, drained in the best possible way. For the first time in half a year, her mind was quiet. She traced a finger over a scar on his ribs, feeling a profound sense of connection to this man who had fallen from the sky and crashed into her life. I'm glad you came, she whispered into the darkness. I'm glad you crashed. Luca tightened his arm around her, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. So am I. He shifted slightly, reaching for the glass of water on the hearth. As he sat up, his body went rigid against hers. Sarah felt the change instantly. The relaxed warmth vanished, replaced by the tension of a coiled spring. Luca, she said. He did not answer. He was staring at the window. The heavy velvet curtains were drawn, but a sliver of glass was visible at the edge. Through it, the swirling snow was illuminated by a faint sweeping beam of light. It was not the moon. It was too focused, too deliberate.
Headlights.
They cut through the darkness of the front yard, sweeping across the front of the cottage before extinguishing abruptly. Luca moved. He was off the floor in a second, crouching low, ignoring his nakedness. He reached for the gun that lay on the table, racking the slide with a terrifyingly familiar click. Sarah, he said, his voice devoid of the warmth that had been there only moments ago. It was the voice of the killer again. Get down. Stay low. Sarah sat up, clutching the blanket to her chest, her heart plummeting from the heights of passion into the depths of terror. What is it? She asked. Luca crept toward the window, pressing himself against the wall. He peered through the crack in the curtains. He watched for a second, then turned back to her. His face was grim, a mask of stone in the dying firelight. They have found me, he said quietly. The peace of the night shattered, replaced by the cold reality of the war waiting outside. The peace of the cabin had been a fragile illusion. The headlights cutting through the darkness outside shattered it completely. Luca moved with a speed that was terrifying to behold. One moment, he was the tender lover, holding her in the afterglow of intimacy. The next, he was a soldier, his body coiled with lethal intent. He was already pulling on his trousers. His movements were sharp and efficient. The gun never left his reach. Get dressed, he ordered. His voice had dropped an octave, stripping away all the softness he had shown her by the fire. Shoes.
Coat, now.
Sarah scrambled up from the rug, clutching her robe to her chest. The cold air of the room hit her skin, but the chill inside her veins was far worse. Who are they? She asked. You said you covered your tracks. I did, Luca said. He dragged his sweater over his head. But the Valentini crew has eyes everywhere. They must have picked up the car on a traffic cam before the storm hit. They have been sweeping the grid. He moved to the window, flattening himself against the wall. He peered through the crack in the curtains. The headlights outside had vanished, extinguished as quickly as they had appeared, which was somehow more frightening. It meant they were no longer looking. It meant they had found what they wanted. We have to run, Sarah whispered. Her hands were shaking as she pulled on her jeans. The woods behind the house. If we leave now, we can lose them in the trees. Luca turned to her. His expression was hard. No, he said. Look outside, Sarah. The snow is 3 feet deep and drifting higher. You would make it 100 yards before the cold took you. Or before they tracked your footprints like a wounded deer. Out there, we're slow and exposed. Here, I control the angles. But we are trapped, Sarah cried. Panic was rising in her throat. We are fortified, Luca corrected. He grabbed her shoulders. His grip was tight enough to bruise. Listen to me, he said. You are safer with me in this room than you are anywhere else on earth right now. Do you understand? Sarah looked into his eyes. They were dark,
fierce,
utterly focused. He was not afraid. He was calculating. She nodded, the motion jerky. I understand. Good, he said. He released her. Get the gun I gave you. Load it. Do not tremble. Sarah ran to the bedroom where she had left the heavy pistol. Her fingers felt like blocks of ice as she fumbled with the magazine. She remembered his lessons from earlier. The weight, the slide, the safety. She forced the magazine home with a solid click. She racked the slide. When she returned to the living room, Luca was already transforming the space. He had flipped the heavy oak table onto its side, creating a barricade facing the front door. He was currently dragging the sofa across the room, blocking the hallway entrance. My phone, he said. He was not looking up from his labor. I have a signal booster in the car, but I cannot get to it. I need your landline. Does it work? Usually, Sarah said. She grabbed the cordless handset from the kitchen counter. There was a dial tone. She handed it to him. Luca dialed a number from memory. His eyes were scanning the perimeter of the room. He waited. His jaw was tight. Dante, he said. It is me. I am burned.
Yes.
The farmhouse off Route 9.
2.
Maybe 3 vehicles. Valentini's men. He listened for a moment. His face was darkening. I need a cleanup crew. He listened again. 12 hours. The plows won't be through until noon. He was silent. I don't care about the plows.
Get a chopper if you have to. Fine.
Get here when you can. He hung up and threw the phone onto the couch. 12 hours. Sarah asked. Her voice was small. The storm has grounded everything, Luca said. He was checking the load in his own weapon. My men are coming, but they have to cut through the same blizzard that trapped us. Can we hold them off for that long? Sarah asked. Luca looked at her. For a second, the mask slipped. He looked tired. We have to, he said. The next few hours were an agony of waiting. The attack did not come immediately. The men outside were professionals. They knew the terrain was against them. Too. They were waiting for the wind to die down, or for the occupants to make a mistake, or simply for the psychological weight of the siege to break them. Inside, the cottage became a pressure cooker. Luca extinguished all the lights, plunging the house into darkness, save for the dying embers of the fire, which he allowed to fade to a dull red glow. They sat in the shadows, listening to the wind howl. Every branch scraping against the siding sounded like a footstep. Every gust of wind sounded like a door opening. Sarah sat with her back against the overturned table, the gun heavy in her lap. Luca paced the perimeter like a caged tiger, moving from window to window, checking the sight lines. The air in the room grew thick, charged with a potent mixture of terror and adrenaline. The fear was an aphrodisiac. It sharpened the senses, making everything vivid and immediate. Sarah watched Luca move, the prowling grace of his body, the lethal competence in his hands. She felt a surge of desire that was almost painful. It was irrational. It was madness. But the proximity of death made the need to feel life burn brighter. Luca stopped pacing. He sensed her eyes on him. He walked over to where she sat. He crouched down, his face inches from hers in the dark. You are staring, he murmured. I am scared, she admitted. And I am angry. And I don't want to die without touching you again. Luca's eyes flared. The tension that had been winding tight between them all night snapped. He reached out, his hand tangling in the hair at the nape of her neck. He pulled her to him. This was not the slow, worshipful lovemaking of earlier. This was desperate. It was rough. It was a collision of two people standing on the edge of a cliff. He pulled her up from the floor, backing her against the wall beside the window. The glass was freezing against her skin, a shock of cold that contrasted violently with the searing heat of his body pressing into hers. Outside, the snow swirled in a white vortex, a silent witness to their frantic union. Sarah, she gasped, his name tearing from her throat. He kissed her hard, devouring the sound. His hands were everywhere, gripping her waist, her hips, possessing her with a ferocity that bordered on violence. There was no gentleness left in him, only a raw, driving need to claim her, to mark her, to prove that they were still breathing. Sarah met him with equal force. She dug her nails into his shoulders, wrapping her legs around him, anchoring herself to him. She needed his weight. She needed his strength. She needed the pain and the pleasure to drown out the fear of what was waiting in the dark. Her moans were stifled against the heavy wool of his sweater, lost in the roar of the wind and the pounding of her own blood. They moved together against the cold window pane, a frantic rhythm of life in the face of death. When the end came, it was explosive, a shattering release that left them both gasping and clinging to each other in the darkness. Their hearts hammering in unison. Luca held her there for a long time, his forehead resting against hers, his breathing slowly returning to normal. He did not let go. He kept her pinned against the wall as if his body could shield her from the reality of the world. "I should not have done that," he rasped. His voice was rough. "I should be watching the door." "You are watching," Sarah whispered. She ran her hand down his arm. "You see everything." They slid down to the floor, sitting huddled together in the corner, away from the direct line of sight of the window. The intimacy had shifted again. The frantic heat had cooled into a somber, heavy bond. They were no longer just lovers or strangers. They were partners in a foxhole. "Tell me," Sarah said softly, breaking the silence. "You said before that you trusted no one, that you learned your lesson." Lucas stared into the shadows. Sarah waited. She knew this costume. Her name was Elena, Lucas said. His voice was devoid of emotion, which made the story sadder. "We grew up together in the neighborhood. She was the only soft thing in a hard world. I thought she was my redemption. I thought if she loved me, I could not be entirely damned." "What happened?" Sarah asked. "I was young," Lucas said. "I was rising fast in the organization. I told her things I should not have, where I was going, who I was meeting." He laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "She sold me for a visa and $10,000. She told a rival family where to find me. They put 2 bullets in my chest and left me in a gutter." Sarah reached out, finding his hand in the dark. She squeezed it. "I survived," Lucas said, "obviously. And I learned love is a leverage. It is a weakness they use to pry you open." "Is that what I am?" Sarah asked. "A weakness?" Luca turned his head, looking at her in the gloom. "No," he said. "You are something else. Something I did not account for. Mark betrayed me, too," Sarah said quietly. "Not with a bullet, but with 1,000 small lies. He sold our safety for money. He sold my trust for his own ego. Then we are a matching set," Luca murmured. "2 people standing in the ruins of the people who were supposed to love us." He squeezed her hand back. His grip was crushing. It was a moment of absolute vulnerability, a shared recognition of their damage. In that dark, cold room, surrounded by enemies, they forged a bond that was stronger than the physical passion they had shared. It was a bond of survival. Crack. The gunshot was louder than thunder. It shattered the moment and the window simultaneously. Glass exploded inward, spraying across the floor like diamonds. The wind roared into the room, carrying the biting cold, the smell of gunpowder. "Down!" Luca roared. He threw himself over her, driving them both flat to the floorboards. A second shot punched through the wall, where they had been standing minutes ago. "Stay low," he commanded. He rolled off her, moving on his belly toward the overturned table. "Crawl to the kitchen," he shouted. "Keep your head down." Sarah scrambled across the floor. The glass was slicing into her palms, but she did not feel it. Her heart was a frantic bird battering against her ribs. She reached the kitchen doorway. She pressed herself behind the refrigerator. She clutched the gun he had given her with white-knuckled desperation. Luca was at the barricade. He did not fire blindly. He waited. He was a statue in the chaos. Another shot rang out, shattering a vase on the mantelpiece. Then another. They were suppressing fire, keeping Luca pinned while they advanced. 3 of them. Luca shouted over the wind, coming from the tree. He rose up, swift as a striking cobra. He fired 2 shots in rapid succession. Bang, bang. Then he ducked back down. A scream tore through the night outside, cut short abruptly. 1 down. Luca gritted out. He moved then, abandoning the safety of the barricade. He knew they would flank him. He knew the house was a trap if he stayed static. "Luca, no!" Sarah screamed as he moved toward the shattered window. He ignored her. He vaulted over the sill, disappearing into the swirling white void of the storm. Sarah sat paralyzed, listening to the sounds of war in her front yard. The wind howled, masking the footsteps, but the gunshots were unmistakable. There was a flurry of fire, rapid, chaotic, then silence. She waited, counting the heartbeats. 1, 2, 10. A shadow loomed in the broken window. Sarah raised her gun. Her finger tightened on the trigger. "It is me." Luca's voice came, breathless and strained. He climbed back inside. He was covered in snow. There was a dark smear of blood on his face that was not his own. He limped slightly as he dropped to the floor, reloading his weapon with trembling hands. "I got the second one," he said, wiping the blood from his eyes. He was trying to circle around to the back door. "Are you hurt?" Sarah crawled toward him, scanning his body for wounds. I am fine, he said, though he flinched when she touched his side. But there are more. I saw the headlights of a second car coming up the drive just before I came in. They are bringing reinforcements. Sarah felt the walls closing in. The cold was seeping into her bones. The reality of their situation was a heavy weight on her chest. We cannot hold them off forever, Sarah said. Luca, I know, Luca said. Run, she begged. She grabbed his arm. You said your men are coming. If you leave now, you can hide in the woods. They want you, not me. If you are gone, they will leave me alone. Luca looked at her. The look on his face broke her heart. It was fierce, protective, devastatingly final. They will not leave you alone, Sarah, he said softly. You have seen my face. You have seen them. They leave no loose ends. If I run, you die. If I stay, we both might die. But at least I can make them pay for every inch. He leaned in, grabbing the back of her neck. He pressed his forehead against hers. His skin was freezing, but his breath was hot. Listen to me, he said. His voice was intense. This is the endgame. They're going to rush the house. I am going to hold the front room. He pulled back to look her in the eye. If they get past me, if you see a man come through that door,
Who is not me?
you shoot him. You do not hesitate. You shoot him in the chest, and you keep shooting until the gun is empty. Luca, please, she said. Tears streamed down her face. And then he continued, ignoring her. You run. You go out the back window. You run north toward the highway. Do not look back. Do not stop for anything. Do you understand? Sarah sobbed, shaking her head. I can't leave you. You have to, Luca said. He kissed her forehead, a lingering, desperate seal of a promise. Because if you die here, Sarah, then I have died for nothing. Save yourself. That is how you save me. He stood up, turning his back on her to face the shattered window and the approaching darkness. He raised his weapon, ready to meet the storm. Get to the kitchen, he ordered, his voice turning to steel. And wait for my signal. Sarah scrambled back, gripping her gun, her tears freezing on her cheeks. She watched his broad back, the only thing standing between her and the abyss. She prayed for a miracle that she knew was not coming. The dawn did not bring the sun. It brought a gray, suffocating light that filtered through the storm clouds, turning the world into a landscape of charcoal and bone. Inside the cottage, the waiting ended with the sudden, deafening roar of an engine revving in the driveway, followed by the sickening crunch of wood splintering. They had rammed the front porch. Go! Luca roared, his voice cut through the chaos. Basement now. He shoved Sarah toward the narrow door in the hallway, his eyes wild and hard, stripped of all the tenderness they had held hours before. Sarah stumbled, gripping the heavy pistol with sweaty hands. But she did not argue. She threw herself down the wooden stairs, the darkness of the cellar swallowing her whole as the world above erupted into violence. She huddled in the corner behind the old furnace,
Her knees pulled to her chest.
the cold concrete seeping through her jeans. Above her, the floorboards vibrated with the heavy thud of boots. Glass shattered, not just one window, but all of them, a cascade of destruction that sounded like ice cracking on a frozen lake. Gunfire erupted, a rhythmic, terrifying staccato that echoed through the vents. It sounded like the house was being torn apart by wolves. Sarah pressed her hands over her ears, but she could not block out the screams. They were guttural, wet sounds of men dying. She squeezed her eyes shut, picturing Luca alone in that living room, a singular force of nature standing against the tide. Please, she prayed to a god she hadn't spoken to in 6 months. Please let him be the one left standing. Something heavy crashed directly above her head, shaking dust from the rafters. Then silence. It was a thick, heavy silence that was worse than the noise. Sarah lowered her hands, her breath hitching in her throat. She waited for Luca's voice. She waited for the all clear. Instead, she heard the creak of the basement door opening. Sarah scrambled back, wedging herself deeper into the shadows. Footsteps descended the stairs. They were slow, heavy, searching. Come out, little bird, a voice rasped. It was not Luca.